good afternoon and welcome to a Northern Power Women webinar supported by United Utilities to celebrate this, which is Inclusion Week. We've got a fantastic webinar ahead for you this afternoon and we're here fancy today. I'm not having to do any of that. Are you on mute or anything? That? We're at MSP Global Studios today, who are housing us, and it's fantastic. It's just weird which screen to look at. I'm delighted to welcome our fantastic panellists. We've got Jo Harrison, who's the Director of Environmental Planning and Innovation for United Utilities. We've got Rob Mukherjee, who's Director of Transformation for EveryCloud Security, and Christina Pearson-Rampeearee, who's a Flight Systems Engineer for BAE Systems. So the format today is I'm going to welcome our panel in a second, and we want you to join in the conversation. I've already seen a little bit in the chat already. We're using the hashtag NPW inclusion. I'll got my teeth in today. And we're going to be talking a range of different conversations today, from unconscious bias to allyship to advocacy. So please do join in the conversation on chat, and I will be bringing the panel in to discuss your conversations later on. So without further ado, let us welcome our panel into today's webinar. Hello! We've got to do it feels different not to have the TV screen in front of me, everyone. It's very strange. Welcome all. How are we today?
Good, thank you.
Good, thank
really
you.
good, thanks, Simone.
Well, Jo, can we start with you? Tell us a bit about yourself and what are you an advocate for?
So my name's Jo Harrison. I'm the Director for Environment Planning and Innovation at United Utilities. I've worked at United Utilities for 22 years, so a long time. I joined as a graduate, and I joined back in 1998 in an all-female graduate intake year, which now seems very progressive for 22 years ago. But I suppose I'm really sort of focused on trying to make sure that we get a really good selection and cross-section and diversity of people at United Utilities. I've obviously been an advocate for females in a very male-dominated environment, but we're sort of thinking far more broadly around social inclusion, as well as obviously ethnic and gender diversity. So it's a real area of focus for us at UU.
Thank you, Jo. Great to have you here today. Rob, over to you. Great to see you again. A massive advocate and supporter, an award winner, a multi-award winner. Congratulations. Last week you were on the Heroes advocate list, weren't you?
Thank you. Yeah, I was. So very pleased with that. Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Mukherjee, Director of Transformation at EveryCloud, as Simone said. We're a very small business, 10 people at the moment, working in cloud security, cloud communications. But my background has been in corporate. So until 2 years ago, I spent most of my life in corporate, most recently with Vodafone. And actually, when I first started my career in the 1990s as well, I started in a very female-dominated office. There's about 3 lads and about 20 girls in our customer service office. And even prior to that, I think my passion for gender balance, as Simone well knows, had already been born through coaching a women's football team. In terms of inclusion, I'm really passionate about this whole journey you often see about inequality to equality to equity to justice, and getting all that way to justice, which means the removal of the systemic barriers we often see. Is something I'm really passionate about. And in terms of what I advocate, I think I've kind of moved a little bit. Now, I try to advocate for all areas of inclusion, of course, but having long been an advocate for gender balance and for women in business, I'm trying to move that on now to be an advocate for male advocates, if you see what I mean. So we really, really need to drive these male advocates. So I'm trying to be an advocate for male advocacy for gender balance.
Brilliant. And that is one of the things we're really passionate about. When we set Northern Power Women up, we always said it is about, role models, all genders, all backgrounds, all those stories. So I think, people always say to me, oh, what about Northern Power Men? And I'm like, we are absolutely, we want that advocacy. It's so really important. And we thank you for your advocacy, Rob. Christina, welcome. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Tell us about yourself. Again, a multi-award winner. You've had a great year, haven't you?
Yeah, so my name's Christina Pearson-Rampeearee. I studied a master's degree in aerospace systems engineering, and I've been working at BAE Systems for about 6 years now as a flight systems engineer. I returned from maternity leave last May 2019, and since then have won the We Are the City Rising Star Award this year in Defence, and been selected for the Northern Power Women Future List, and become a professionally registered chartered engineer. So it's been quite a year, and I started a small business. So I'm an advocate for women in engineering. There are only 12% of working engineers who are female in the UK. And I feel very passionate about inspiring more young girls to consider STEM careers, especially after my own experiences of studying and working in an environment which is majority male. That's me.
And haven't you created, I've seen on social, Krystina, you've created little badges as well?
Yes. So I created over lockdown, came up with the idea of creating little enamel pin badges saying this is what an engineer looks like, and donating part of the proceeds to the Women's Engineering Society.
Fantastic. That's great. And is that going well? We can put the details on that as we follow up from this as well. We give it a little plug.
It's done better than I thought it would, really. It's been quite a surprise.
Well, I'm just picking up on you, Rob. You talk about advocacy, and I think we've all got a passion here in sort of different areas and cross areas. And I think we've launched a report this morning, Levelling Up and Powering On report, which we did just a few hours back. And there's over this COVID pandemic period, we cannot get away from the fact that the people that have been disadvantaged most by this awful pandemic have been women, Black, Asian, minority ethnic, and our young people. And we've got a long winter ahead. So I think for me, how do we had Andy Burnham on the session this morning, and we asked him to advocate for what we're doing, which is, if you like, we've talked long and hard about giving up a seat at the table, or give us a seat at the table. We want more than one seat. But you talked about advocacy, Rob. Why is it so important to move from that, I suppose, passive role into active? How can we get more people to be advocates for the areas that they're passionate about?
Yeah, I think the why is really important. So I think the processes that that you can go through, and I love the report, by the way, that came out today, and the whole piece about it's not just about lofty plans, it's about really cracking on and doing practical things. And I've always been an advocate for find practical things that you can do. In terms of the why, I think one thing we've seen during lockdown is, unfortunately, people have reverted to their previous core of what was potentially important to them, and maybe they may have seen the sort of the inclusion piece as the icing on the cake, or the bit that's built on top of their core roles. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of become a reality during lockdown. Unfortunately, people have fallen away a little bit from the things that they know they should be acting upon. But I often try and go back to reminding people of probably 3 key things that you can absolutely demonstrate inclusion makes a difference in. And one is innovation. And I don't think I need to preach anymore about why diversity breeds innovation. I think that's well understood. Another one is collaboration. And I do get frustrated when people say, oh yeah, well, we know women are kind of collaborative, and they're they've got great empathy, but they're not competitive. And there's a lady close to Northern Power, I know, called Natalie Reynolds, who I saw do a brilliant piece on women are brilliant at competitive collaboration. And then the other thing, I think, probably still on innovation, actually, it's not just about coming up with the ideas, but it's about quality decision making. So for innovation, you need creative ideas and you need quality decision making. So once you've got a room of diverse people making those ideas, the quality decision making is often lacking, because historically you'll see the board of men, let's say, will accept a group of ideas that have come from a diverse group, but the decisions are made by a group of men who all pat themselves on the back and think, oh, haven't we done a great job? Because you don't have the constructive tension with differences of opinions in that decision making. So you have to have diverse people at the decision making board. And then the final thing I'll say is transformational leadership is the third thing. So innovation, collaboration, and then thirdly, transformational leadership. Because in this day and age, we don't live in the Dickensian age where you have clocking in and clocking out, and we've got a situation where people just won't accept that command and control type of leadership. We need relationships leadership. And again, that takes diverse people with diverse experiences and diverse perspectives on life.
Thanks, Rob. Joe, how do you build a culture of advocacy within United Utilities? Because obviously you're a far spread out business, even more now with obviously people working from home, but you still have people all over the north of England. How do you really sort of champion that, you know, enable more advocates within your within your organisation?
So I suppose we undertake a variety of different approaches. So we have a really strong sort of philosophy around mentoring and championing people. So, you know, we have sort of strong relationships between some of our graduates and our aspiring managers and senior leaders, which we really try and make sure of sort of that hold fast in these sort of strange times and different ways of working. And then we have some very strong groups that look at things like gender equality, and we have a BAME network, and so, you know, we have quite a few networks that sort of spread across the organisation as well. But I think it's a really fair point that you know, those sort of things are really easy to ensure that you're doing, and you can really focus on them when you're all in the office together. And there is a real risk that when you're all working from home, like, you know, we are at the moment, that they can be seen as the icing on the cake, like Rob just explained. And you know, we've really got to sort of actually sort of put them at the front of our to-do list, and, you know, at the front of everybody's minds, that actually it's about creating that cohesive, progressive workforce that is the most important thing that we need to be doing, and not just a nice to have. So I think it is a real challenge in these times, and I suppose, you know, it's very easy to reach out to those people who want to be reached out to and who are themselves looking for that help and support. But for all those people who aren't, you know, people can become a little bit lost in these times, and so it's really important that we continue to focus in this area.
Absolutely, definitely. And Krystina, you're clearly an advocate. You know, you've just talked about WISE, you know, women in science and engineering, a great organisation, and you want to be that visible role model. But what would you say? How would you encourage other people within their organisations, especially at this time where we haven't necessarily got that day-to-day physical connectivity? It's bizarre today to be in this wonderful studio here and see lots of people in close contact, all with masks on. But you know, how do we really encourage that allyship within organisations? What would you say to people? Why is it important to be an ally?
Well, obviously, it's really important to be an ally to create that inclusive atmosphere that we need for diversity. Things that people can do, speak up if there are situations where you are comfortable about a situation, or if you see something happening, speaking up, speaking to people about their experiences, what can be done to make them feel like they're more included and valued. I think having an inclusive and supportive working environment makes employees feel more valued, and that helps with creativity and creating that atmosphere where you have the result of innovation that you need from that.
And I think innovation is a word we've talked about a few times today, and I think over this period as well, I think I kind of seesaw from thinking, gosh, we've got a real chance to innovate and build forward better, to then, you know, how do we not go back into that 1950s Britain approach? Have you seen that within your organisations? You're all sort of very agile and forward focused, you know, organisations. But there's anything within your businesses have you seen that come about? We had some reports where we heard, you know, presenteeism was back in certain places. How do we stop that from happening? Rob?
So we actually made a decision in June 2019 to do away with our offices permanently. So we're quite happy that we're a year ahead of the curve in that sense, before it was forced upon us. And we did that because of presenteeism, because what was happening was we saw people turning up to work in an office because they felt they had to be there, and they turn up, still spend most of the time talking to customers, you know, on the phone, which they could have done from home or by video conference. We also wanted to introduce a concept of a 4-day week as standard, and pick your own hours as standard. And that then became again, the norm. So the norm became, instead of being in an office, it's at home. We'll still have co-working spaces if people want to get there. And I'm disappointed. I haven't seen so much with our clients or with our partners of people focusing too much on presenteeism. That may be the nature of the business that we deal in, because as our name suggests, every cloud is all about working in the cloud and not needing physical premises. But in terms of how you stop people relying on it, I think it probably comes back to the why again in terms of the education. And maybe you need a mix of the force. I used to be a bit of an idealist, think it can just be about the why and educate people, it'll happen. But I think your report quite rightly showed that you need to do some quite almost, well, not exactly aggressive, but some quite pushy stuff as well to really make stuff happen. Otherwise, you won't shift the status quo.
I think there's something about intention. I think sometimes it's, and I think that kind of this brings us on to when, with the death of George Floyd back at the start of the summer, and the rise and the vocal of the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests and everything that went around that. I think the conversation was around how do we join this conversation? How do we do something? And I think I remember I think I saw I think it was Meghan Markle speaking. It was like, it's better to say something than to say nothing at all. How have, Krystina, how is sort of the different sort of the politics, the COVID, the Black Lives Matter, how has this sort of impacted on sort of your conversations around inclusion? How do we educate around sort of some of these topics, in particular our kids?
I think most importantly, it's listening to people. Listening to people's experiences, listening to those who are affected, and then educating ourselves and educating others based on what we're hearing. Educating children, I think being honest. Because my little boy, he's 2 years old, so he wouldn't really understand, but we still have to set an example to him. Biases are learned from society, from people around you. So things like that can affect the way that children are brought up. So it is important to be honest.
Jo, what about how do we talk to our kids about what's going on right now? We've just come through a challenging 6 months. We've potentially, got a few months ahead of us. With all of these different issues going on. How do we parent around this?
Well, I think maybe we almost need to ask the opposite question. So I've got 2 daughters, they're 12 and 14, and I would suggest that they're educating me most of the time. I like to think of myself as being very broad-minded and very liberal, but the kids at school these days are really sort of focused on diversity and equality and inclusion, to such a significant extent that it's just how they are and how they live their lives. And I think the education from my perspective is the other way around a little bit. How do we take that youthful enthusiasm for seeing the world in such a wonderful way and bring that back into the workplace for a sort of 20s to 50s to actually sort of embed in the way that we work and the way that we expect people to behave with each other. And I think sort of linking back to what you were asking about in terms of the sort of ways of working and post-COVID, I think that actually this sort of step change in a working environment, working from home, working flexibly will really enable us to be thinking differently from an inclusion and diversity perspective, because it allows us to be so much more flexible and take account of everybody's needs. So I really hope that we can just maintain that moving forward.
I would say, Jo, you in essence have had your own reverse mentorship from your kids. Any top tips, anything that you thought, gosh, I had no idea, or any sort of any wisdom that was imparted to you that you thought, right, well, I would never have got that over the last 6 months?
Oh, I don't know really. I think they're just so accepting of everybody wanting to live their lives in the way that they want to. It's just very, very refreshing, I think, to sort of experience that. And I suppose the thing that I think that we sometimes have a bit of a blind side to is around sort of social inequality. I think, we're very focused on trying to promote gender equality and trying to promote a sort of diversity of sort of thought and experience, but how much do we focus on social equality and social inclusion and making sure that we've got the right opportunities for all parts of society to flourish and succeed in the roles and the careers that they undertake?
And Rob, how are your kids been over lockdown? How was homeschooling? Or if I looked on social media, Rob, I think it was football training, was it not?
Yes, it was actually. Yeah, so Cameron ended up on BBC telly one Saturday morning, the few days after his 11th birthday, on the Goals at Home on Match of the Day on Football Folk. So he was delighted with that. How did they do? They're definitely glad to be back at school, that's for sure. So I think, like all of us, they started off okay, then went through that dip where people are at the lowest, and that was the same with them. Really missing school and friends and wanting the routine back. So not easy, definitely. I think, I'd echo what Joe said. I think children's capacity and capacity for inclusion, really, and I wouldn't even call it a passion, because it's just normal for them. Cameron, my younger one, one of his football coaches is a woman, which in my day would have seemed really strange. The fact we listen to football commentators on the BBC now that are women, and it doesn't seem odd anymore, is great. And I think, and my eldest son, he does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now, but he's played netball, and that seemed totally normal for a lad. So I think it's just hopefully not questioned these things anymore. It is just the normal. Whereas I know in my day, all of those sorts of things would have seemed strange. But yes, the kids are both great, thank you, as is Heather.
And actually, one of the first things that you did a talk for us years ago, which was You're Only Young Once, Young Once, wasn't it, Rob? And that was about the premise of taking parental leave, wasn't it? And I think there was almost an essence of that unconscious bias around it, or sort of gosh, you've taken that, surely you're jeopardizing your career. Did you? Because that happened to you, didn't you? Didn't it, Rob?
Yeah, exactly that. So it would have been, and this is the difference between parental leave and maternity/paternity leave that Simone's talking about. So parental leave, for those who aren't aware, is the fact that anybody with children can take up to 18 weeks leave through the first per child through that child's first 18 years, and up to 4 weeks per year per child. So when my eldest child was about 5, which is 10 years ago now, I took parental leave. And in the corporate that I was in at the time, there was other senior leaders or peers of mine saying, are you not worried what that will do for your career, taking time off with your children? And I wasn't worried, and I refused to be worried. And actually, when I changed bosses, my first boss was fine with it, but when I got a new boss, his words when he found out they had parental leave planned for the summer were, Jesus wept, well, you'll have to cancel it then. And I didn't cancel it, and I refused to cancel it. And I just know it was the right thing to do, because to Simone's point, you've got a lifetime of work, but your children are only young once. And I think this is something linked to the whole paternity piece, that it feels wrongly, historically, it feels more normal for women to take time off work than it does for men. And therefore, that breeds a certain society in the working environment where men feel uncomfortable that they will be looked at differently for taking time off work to spend with the children, which just goes to cement that whole caveman, mentality of, oh yeah, woman stays at home to cook and grow things and look after the children, and man goes out hunting for the money. It's just an absolute nonsense that belongs in the Stone Age. Well, it didn't even belong in the Stone Age, actually, but it certainly doesn't belong now.
And Krystina, what do your young one, what do they look up to mummy and think that mummy is a total rock star role model who makes cool badges as well?
Well, I don't think he really understands yet, but mummy is the one who volunteers and daddy is the one who cooks, and that's how it is in our household. We share responsibilities, we alternate who does bedtime, who does nursery drop off. We try and do as much as we can equally, and my husband does the activities at the weekend, takes him to swimming, when I can do some volunteering work. So it works out for both of us, and he gets to see us both in our roles as equals.
And did you make that an intentional decision, and that was going to be the case?
Not at first, but I think because I wanted to do things, I wanted to carry on with my work, I wanted to take these opportunities that I'm getting, and in order to do that we had to balance the work, otherwise I couldn't do everything and do the household things as well, and it's not been an issue, and it's just seemed natural.
Thank you. One of the things I want to move on, we talked about sort of unconscious bias, that it's a well-used phrase, everything around inclusion, but kind of want to hone down into sort of language, and what language we use. I think we've referred to the Black Lives Matter and so the outcry after the George Floyd killing, and the terminology used around that. And I think even when we were writing this report and sort of telling different stories, we had to be sort of really intentional with, there's a real outcry against the term BAME, and it's how do we best use this, how do we best describe the audience that we're trying to advocate for, or allyship is. And I know sort of you are so sort of broad in all of the areas that you covered, Jo, but is this something that you've had to take into account at UU around the language which you use for your colleagues and how you employ and etc.?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we all worry, don't we? We're sort of worrying that we're sort of tripping ourselves up with our own language. I'd never heard that about BAME. We have a BAME network at United Utilities, so I guess we might have to look at changing that. So I think, there's lots and lots of sensitivities that, we worry about, we don't properly understand, and we just need to think, a little bit differently about in terms of the way that we communicate to others. And I suppose it's how we translate that into the outcomes that we're trying to achieve as well. And so, sort of focusing sometimes, sort of creates a bit of a tension that isn't necessarily going to sort of lead to a productive outcome or a productive change. So yeah, it's a really complicated area.
And Rob, around language, you're in the cloud space, so you're everywhere. How are you making sure you have the right tone of language for your organization, or as you're kind of communicating with your colleagues and clients?
Yes, so a good example, I'll use a very specific example actually related to the clients. So we do a lot in the sports sector. So of course, Everton are one of our clients, but football, cricket as well, Lancashire cricket. And one thing when I came into the organisation, I looked at our Protect Your Sport brochure a couple of years ago, and with no malicious intent, of course, that brochure was covered with pictures of white men doing sport. So things like that, and when I said we've got to change it, everyone agreed, and they just echoed, "Oh, we didn't do it intentionally." And it was actually our company didn't do it; the graphic designers did it, but that's no excuse because it was going out from us. So things like that, I think that because we do a lot in the sports arena, that's just one example of something we do. And then because we do that, people internally and externally, mainly internally, really makes sure that next time they'll realise, well, actually, we need to make sure everything we do covers all types of people. And I just picked that as an example.
There's one of our Panellists, Penny Haslam, broadcaster, journalist, and she used to do something called a Haslam test, and it was exactly that, Rob. She would go through the brochure. If she was doing work with a client, she would go through that brochure or go through that website and say, does this appeal to me? Do I look like that person in there? And Krystina, I go back to your badges, badge envy, this is what an engineer looks like. Is that why you created that, to sort of change the myth of what that perception was about?
Oh, 100%. There's a stereotype, isn't there, of what a typical engineer looks like, with a hard hat, male, in a high-vis jacket. If you Google engineer, I'm pretty sure those are the images that come up. And I wanted to show that is not just what an engineer looks like. An engineer looks like all kinds of people, because all kinds of people are engineers, and that's why I started it.
And I think that's the power of role models. I know, Joe, you are passionate about social mobility, and obviously you cover such a wide-reaching sort of area in different disciplines within the business. Social mobility, again, it's something that can't always be seen. But why is social mobility so important to what you're doing? I know you've got a big launch, haven't you, next week for the Social Mobility Pledge?
Yeah, so we're working across the water industry with Water UK to develop what we're calling a social mobility pledge, which is, all around sort of trying to focus on how do we sort of represent ourselves and our customers and make sure that we're sort of really driving improvements in social mobility. And I think, you're absolutely right. It can be a bit hidden away. And, in our area sort of covers the northwest of England. It's one of the most deprived areas of the country. We've got some really poor communities. So what can we do in order to really sort of try and drive better social mobility through those communities and in everything we do, in people we directly employ or we employ through our supply chain. So it's a real area of focus for us. And we're doing quite a lot of work with people like Salford University to really sort of try and drive improvements in our sort of recruitment approach. So it's really sort of it's about focusing on all those entry points within the organisation, how we can do things differently to attract different people who aren't necessarily like us, but who think differently and bring that opportunity for innovation and creativity, like we talked about before.
Thank you, Joe. And Krystina and Rob, so to both of you actually, is that something that your organisations have taken on? Is that you like that blind recruitment where you can sort of de-gender or sort of de-influence the applications that come in front of you? Krystina, do you do that? Do you do that at BAE?
At BAE, I know that they are using more gender decoded language for job description. So yes, there is a tool that you can use online to see what kind of phrasing, what bias, whether it's male or female, is used in the wording that you're using. I believe I read yesterday that the US, a research in the US showed that gender neutral job adverts received up to 42% more applications than their more biased counterparts, which is a massive amount of talent that you're potentially missing out on because you're skewed to a particular bias in your job description. So it just shows you really the difference it can make.
And Rob, yourself, is this something that you guys do?
Yeah, so we're 10 people in our organisation, so we have a very, very flat hierarchy. So every job description that goes out, I get to see anyway. And yes, exactly what Krystina says. We make sure we test using those tools that it's that it's inclusive in terms of the language. The CVs don't come in blind because they come in straight to us from an agency, and we know that in cybersecurity we really struggle. We really struggle to find women who join us. So we're 80%. That shouldn't be that hard, should it? It's working out 8 out of 10. But we are 80% male in our employee base, and it guts us. It really does. And we ask our agencies, try and find women, and we really struggle.
I think you need to get Krystina to make "This is what cyber looks like" badges.
Could
be an option.
Yeah.
I've got some questions here. Do you feel inclusion, this is from Diane R, do you feel inclusion is segregated into different groups rather than looking at solutions for all groups? So should we keep the separate employer groups, or should we look at more of a united group? Joe, I know you've got lots of employee groups, really proactive groups over there at Lingley.
Yeah, we have, and I suppose that's sort of evolved over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and there's obviously a model that lots of companies employ, but I do really get the point. I've never thought of myself as being different in any way. You sort of, so why distinguish between men and women and promote, focus on promoting one over the other? I don't know. I think it's a really, really good point. And I think, it's about how you sort of get that parity of approach across all different types of people. So, yeah, it's a really good point.
And Krystina, do you think it's do you advocate for sort of separating into different groups, or do you think it should be sort of group by group, sort of that, I suppose, that intersectionality?
Like Joe, I think it's a really good question. At BAE, there are different employee groups. I guess there are different issues particular to different groups. Whether solutions for all groups would fit all is another discussion point, really.
We worked with Liverpool Football Club about 18 months ago. Really brilliant. We're talking about, like, you know, women at Liverpool Football Club, and ultimately the group that they ended up curating and has been so proactive is like a unity collective, which is, you know, trying to take in the different challenges from each of the groups. So I think, you know, I think ultimately as well, Rob, it has to fit within the culture of the organisation, doesn't it? What type of groups that you have?
Yeah, I mean, we have our EveryCloud, everyone group. So, and we're a very small organisation, so we have one group, basically. However, for larger organisations where I have worked before, and for societies, my personal opinion, rightly or wrongly, is that it does make sense to have separate groups. And the reason I say that is because one problem I think you have, or I personally had growing up, was identity. So I think people often need to feel there's something they can strongly identify with. So whichever minority that would be, I think is important. Otherwise, disabilities is often, as an example, a forgotten minority. And I think if you lump it all into one, then my opinion, rightly or wrongly, because it's just an opinion. Shall I stop apologising for having an opinion?
Yeah, you should never apologise.
But my opinion is that you do need those different things. And I remember, you know, as I was growing up, I often tell this story when we talk about ethnic minorities, is that I was a massive Evertonian, but Everton was the last club that remained having white players only, and Everton was renowned for having a racist crowd in the in the late 80s and early 90s, and I was there and had to be subjected to that at Goodison. So on the one hand, I really wanted to be part of this Everton family, but on the other hand, I was Asian, so I found myself torn and confused between what is my identity then, because I don't fully feel part of either.
Thanks, Rob. I've got a couple more questions here. Krystina, I've got one here. As someone who is just starting their career, what can I do to drive change within my organisation when it comes to diversity?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if I was muted then. That's a really good question. I think talking to others, maybe setting up a kind of D&I charter, setting out commitments for yourself and for your employer, and making sure those commitments are measured, and that you revisit those commitments. That's important to make sure that the change that you want is happening, and if not, what can you do to make that difference?
How did you go about influencing change within the organisations you've worked at?
Is that to me? Sorry,
Krystina. Yes. How did you start? Is that how you started?
I think I started by networking a lot with people who are like-minded, in the same minority as me, other women, and then making not noise, but speaking out about my experiences. And then I think with people seeing how I was feeling and also felt the same way, it kind of struck a chord, and that in that way it was, how do we want to make these changes that we want, and those discussions, and that's how I started, really.
And Joe, actually, we've started over the lockdown period. We've started a Northern Power Futures podcast supported by United Utilities, and that was absolutely going to the voices of young people to sort of address their hopes, fears, dreams, aspirations. And I remember on one at the very first season, I think there was a question along that lines, is, I'm going to start a new role. How do I network within that role, and how can I kind of influence for good within that? How can that, how are you dealing with that at UU, as you've got sort of new joiners, new starters, apprentices? How can they influence what goes on?
So I suppose it's a variety of things, isn't it? So, I think I'd really encourage people to have mentors or advocates or sponsors or whatever you want to call them, but people who will understand the aspiration that people have and help guide them and promote them and introduce them to opportunities. So I think that's it's still a valid method and mechanism. I think encouraging that sort of alignment of like-minded thinking, so encouraging people to form groups and sort of seek out those experiences. I think sort of being confident to go and look at other departments and spend time not doing work experience, but going and understanding sort of the broader spectrum of what other parts of the business are doing. So and just being confident to challenge. And I think that's something that managers really need to sort of encourage, that it's making sure that everybody has a voice in the organisation, and trying to sort of encourage that diversity of thought to create a better environment, more innovation, etc., etc.
We had Dame Julie Kenny was on our report launch this morning, and she talked about having they had an apprenticeship as a trustee, and I thought that was really interesting. And it's not just, it kind of leads me on to the next question. It's not a lip service thing or a tick box thing they've done. It is a full term that they've taken. So it wasn't just we'll just get somebody young on the trusteeship and whatever. They've now bedded that in. They will always have an apprenticeship role on that on their trustee board, which I thought was interesting. And that one of the other questions I've got here, this is for you, Rob. What sort of things can you do to make sure a company you're interviewing for is genuinely inclusive and not just paying lip service to it? I think this is some of our Northern Power Futures questions going in here. It's brilliant. But what do you think, Rob? What sort of things can you do to make sure that, and it goes to the point right at the start where we talk about, that sort of how you go from being a passive supporter to active. How do you take the lip service away?
Yeah, I smiled and grimaced when I saw that question.
Sorry.
Because it happens, right? And I remember last year I got really fed up on International Women's Day because I saw so many PR stunts. And I knew some of those companies and I knew the reality behind it. So it does make me really, really cross when companies pretend they're something they're not. What kind of things can you do? I suppose ask, because often if a company wants to recruit you, right, the reality is, and we've all been there, they'll wheel out the people. They'll wheel out people to make the company look great, right? I think you're just asking very, very searching questions. Now, the kind of analogy that I did was when, a previous company I worked for a while ago, I asked when I went for an internal interview, what that manager thought about parental leave. And I knew that my previous manager had been supported, but the manager who was going for this interview with, her answer, and was a lady. She said, because I say the quote was a lady because people might think, well, it's only blokes who would have these views. But her answer was, well, it's your entitlement. So I said, well, I know parental leave is my entitlement. I asked what you think of it. And her response was, well, we know it's going to be really intense in this role. And if you take parental, the more time you take off with your children, the more pressure you're going to be putting on this business. So I think you need to go away and have a think about that, Rob, and decide what's important to you. And I did go away and think about what was important to me. And I'm glad I didn't take the role. So I think don't hold back. And I know another lady who I've been mentoring has gone for an interview recently at a manufacturing company. And we had the same kind of chat. And we said, ask the questions up front, very specifically about what's important to you. Don't join the company. Don't try and get through the door and then say, oh, well, actually, I'd like to do this, or actually, I'd like to do this, or actually, I believe in this. Be really clear on what beliefs are important to you at the interview and test them on it.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry, you got a tough one there. You didn't have to apologise. Joe, when encouraging women in the workplace in both internal growth and in employing more women in business in general, so when encouraging more women in the workplace, how do you propose is the best way to target and encourage those women from disadvantaged economic backgrounds who often have less exposure and opportunities available to them in the first place?
One of the sort of the really sort of critical things, I mean, obviously, you know, like Krystina, I work in a sort of STEM industry, so we're, you know, we're really looking for, you know, people with expertise in the sciences, and you know, I think there's an issue, isn't there, around sort of the understanding of careers and opportunities that exist among, you know, sort of some sections of society, and unfortunately, and I think, you know, where we're really focusing is how to sort of provide really good careers advice, how to provide experience for people of what working in an organisation like ourselves is like, and so that you can sort of really open people's eyes to what type of careers are available in, you know, sort of science and industry, but also then to provide a sort of structured view of how they would then access those. So, you know, I think it is quite a difficult thing to do. We're trying to do more and more of it. We offer lots of internships, and you know, that's a really good way of sort of seeing what an organisation does and trying to sort of build that knowledge and understanding. But I think it is quite hard, but it's you know, it's very impenetrable what a lot of us do, isn't it? You know, lots of parts of society I've got no idea about, you know, the careers and the industry that sort of exists, and so how do you sort of try and really open people's eyes to what those opportunities are, and how they might fit into it, and how, you know, that it sort of represent, you know, it's opportunities for people like them, and how do you sort of you create that environment.
It just go on to I always think it always comes back as well to the visibility of role models. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I'll just keep another plug for Krystina's badge. But I think it does, doesn't it? I think that's really important. And so, one sort of, just a question here is, you know, what more do you think that needs to be done to reduce the pay gaps in particular disability? And I think I saw an article on LinkedIn this morning, because there has been, over this COVID period, a sort of the reporting of gender pay gap has been stalled, or has been paused, shall I say, not stalled. But what can we do sort of to keep the momentum going? What can we do to, is it diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance? What can every one of us, because we always like to, you know, we want people to go away thinking of what's the one thing that everyone here on this Zoom call who watches it later or hears it on the podcast, what's the one thing that everyone can do to kind of make that their society or their organization more inclusive? Just give that time to ponder. Thank you so much for everyone who's posted their questions. Before I go to the panel with that last one, Krystina, what's the one thing that everyone can do to make a more inclusive organisation or more inclusive culture around them? Krystina.
So one thing, it's very hard to pick one thing.
Give me two, it's good.
I definitely think listening, because the only way that we will know what people want from their working environment or what people need is to listen to people about what they want and what they need. I think that would be my main point, really, listening.
Jo, what would be your top tip? How do we make your community, your organisation more inclusive?
I think one of the things that I thought about when we were sort of preparing for this session today was the fact that, you know, even within work and even in the sort of, you know, trying to think as sort of with a really inclusive mind, we are still very much have a tendency, don't we, to engage with people who are like us. And so I think, you know, it's really trying to think differently about that, and to sort of think about how you create that you know, better diversity in the people that you engage in meetings, in decision making, to try and seek out alternative perspectives, and because I think it's so easy for us to just try and sort of reinforce the views that we already have. So how, you know, it might make life a little bit more difficult, but how do we create that much sort of broader approach to thinking and decision making?
Okay, thank you. And Rob?
Yeah, kind of echoing Krystina's point, I was going to say exactly that, the listening and also looking out for, you know, in everything you do. And it just happens to some of us naturally now. Anything you spot where you think, actually, that's not inclusive, try and address it and do something about it. And I think maybe, you know, in years gone by, a long time ago, I might have known it wasn't inclusive, but just let it slip, or it just wasn't worth the effort. But I absolutely realised it absolutely is worth the effort. So every potential opportunity you have to redress the balance, then please take it.
And is that the same as about calling it out? So if you
hear
exactly, somebody
every
or
time.
Yeah, and is that something, do you think we're getting better as a society of calling out? Joe, Rob, sorry, I'll stay with you, Rob, while you're on the screen.
Yeah, I think we are getting better, but it will have happened to all of us. Every now and again, someone will push back and say, "Oh, I think you're taking it too far," or "I think you're focusing on it too much." That will happen every now and again, but we still carry on because most of the time it'll be accepted. But I think every one of us sometimes someone will have sighed and gone, "Oh, you're still going on about that." But yeah, we are getting better.
So how do we keep going on that, Joe? How do we call it out or find a different way to do it? If we hear something that has been said that has been wrong or poor behaviour.
I think if you hear something that is wrong or is poor behaviour, then I think most people feel like they can challenge it. I suppose it's where you've got things that are a little bit more subtle, isn't it? So how many times do I go to a meeting where I'm the only woman in the meeting? It happens an awful lot. And, it's not that the wrong people are invited. It's just that, actually we haven't got that diversity in the workplace. And so it's how do you sort of start to challenge things like that? So it's this sort of the more subtle things, I think, that actually will perpetuate unless we try and stop them.
And is there just any sort of top tips? I'm just going to try and summarize. And if you've sent any questions to us that we haven't got to, we'll pick them up in the follow-up sort of blog write-up that we'll do on this as well. But just any top tips on balancing the recruitment process? Top tips, just we've talked about blind recruitment, we've talked about gender neutral language or gender decoding, but any top tips or anything that you've even seen that other organisations do? Krystina, have you seen anything in this space?
So I would say for one of my top tips, I would say learn about what your biases are. There is a tool, a Harvard tool, where you can recognise what your biases are and then learn how to mitigate those biases. Brilliant,
thank you. Rob, yours, top tips?
Just something we experienced. We found in a smaller business, with our lack of female talent, what we have succeeded in doing is bringing on women who have been made redundant and wanted and one of them was been made redundant and then had a child, didn't want to go back to full-time work, so do something that works on their terms, and it worked really well. Another woman who wanted to do a 4-day week on her terms, which gave us the idea, which was when we took her on, we thought, well, why don't we do that for everybody? Taking on people who may not necessarily be qualified. I saw something in a chat message from someone saying, well, they may not have achieved the qualification. That's exactly what we do. Take people on who might not necessarily have the qualification, but they've got the raw talent. And then something else we've done is where we can't employ somebody necessarily, we're also trying to get this partner ecosystem where there's a lot of people, as you know, in the Northwest trying to start their own businesses. So we try and partner with self-employed women trying to do their own thing and use them as a consultant who we might pay a fee to. So even if we can't employ people directly, we're actually trying to help that ecosystem as well of people trying to run their own businesses.
And I think there's a Harvard Business Review report out recently, which is around the majority of people going back into big offices would be white men. And actually that was leaving a lot more women either getting made redundant or being furloughed or having to cut their hours or leave their jobs. But actually there's a rise of that freelance stroke entrepreneurship coming up as well. So that's great news that you're supporting that ecosystem as well. Thanks, Rob. Joe, any top tips for you in that recruitment process?
I think the thing that I sort of really want to focus on going forward is this sort of issue about imposter syndrome. So women not feeling that they're good enough to undertake jobs, and that sort of link with the way that we have that sort of narrative of explanation of job roles that we use. So really sort of focusing on the language that we use and really sort of encouraging and mentoring women to take more of a chance than they otherwise would.
100%. I think imposter syndrome happens to every single person, male, female, all different backgrounds. I've got it on this lone studio right now, but it's quite cool. So, but listen, I just want to thank all of you for getting involved in this conversation this week in Inclusion Week. Thank you for all of you on Zoom who have put your questions in the chat. If we didn't get them to all, we'll circle back round and get onto them. But please keep the conversation going on social media at North Power Women. A big thank you to our fantastic panel, to Rob, to Krystina and to Joe, and thank you so much for our fantastic studio here today at MSP Global, and thank you so much for United Utilities for supporting this. This will be put onto a podcast in the coming weeks, and we'll also have one of our life lessons. But if you want to share your sort of your journey, then please do send us an email, connect at Northern Power Women. You can share your life lessons. As Joe says, get away from that imposter syndrome and tell us all about yourselves, because we want to spread those stories. Thanks so much for giving us the time this afternoon, and great to see you. Thank you. #WeAreNPW.